President Trump continues his nationwide campaign tonight. He'll be heading to Southport, Indiana, just outside of Indianapolis, with Vice President Mike Pence. That's Indiana's former governor, if you've forgotten. The president will return to the Hoosier State on Monday for a trip to Fort Wayne. He's campaigning for Republican Senate candidate Mike Braun. In a recent CBS News Battleground Tracker poll, Braun led incumbent Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly by 3 percentage points. That's all, of course, within the margin of error. Matt Smith is a political reporter for Indianapolis affiliate WTTV. He joins me now. Hey, Matt, thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. Good to be with you this afternoon.
So, it's interesting. You look at the polling. It's just gone back and forth throughout the Senate race. Where exactly at this point, just days before midterms, do Indiana voters stand?
That's the million-dollar question, right? The CBS poll had Braun up 3 points. We had a couple other polls in the last couple days come out that had Donnelly up only by a couple points, all, as you mentioned, within the margin of error. What was really interesting, though, in the Battleground Tracker poll is that nearly 1 in 5 Hoosiers said still, as of last week, they could likely change their mind. And I really think that's why you're seeing President Trump here today, along with Vice President Pence, former President Obama on Sunday, President Trump again on Monday. The campaigns realize there are still a lot of these persuadable voters, and likely some people who may change their minds in the coming days. We had our final debate here in Indiana just a couple of days ago. Whether that changed anyone's mind is still up for question. But I think there is this core chunk of supporters for either camp that could still have a little bit of wiggle room as we head into Tuesday.
I'm always so surprised, like days before an election, Matt, when you tell me that people are still undecided. I mean, like, how can you be undecided at this point? But what do you find that these folks that can, this margin of folks who can be persuaded one way or the other at this point, what do they want?
Well, listen, we're in a really red state, right? President Trump won Indiana by 20 points, nearly 20 points back in 2016. If you look at Senator Donnelly's campaign ads, besides his last one that he's airing right now, which is the come together piece, right, that we typically see at the very end, and you didn't know who Senator Donnelly was, you may think he was a Republican, the way he was talking in his final couple of ads. So you have that dynamic playing of a Democrat, a moderate Democrat, really trying to win re-election in a red state. And you have this new incomer to national statewide politics, Mike Braun. And I think that could be playing a little bit of a factor in what we're seeing, at least short term here.
It's interesting you're talking about how they're couching themselves. Senator Joe Donnelly also pitched himself as a moderate. He voted for Gorsuch. He voted against the GOP tax bill, the repeal of the Affordable Health Care Act, Brett Kavanaugh. Is his centrist pitch really appealing to Indiana voters?
I think there's a core chunk of voters that it is appealing to, and this is Senator Donnelly's challenge, along with a number of other Democratic senators that we're seeing play out across the country. The fact that he has this record of being a somewhat moderate, so to speak, is what's helping and hurting him in certain instances as you look at certain examples. So you look at the Kavanaugh vote, that was really hyped up and played for the last couple of weeks, but that is shifted. And there's been a lot of talk about health care. There's been a lot of talk about taxes, so forth and so on.
Matt, you mentioned how President Trump won in 2016 the state by 20 points. Is Republican candidate Mike Braun embracing the president's rhetoric and his stance at this point?
So he's embracing President Trump, not necessarily all of the rhetoric, and I think that can go one of two ways. So Mike Braun has come out and said, and he will use this on the campaign trail a lot, he says, listen, I wouldn't be here if Hillary Clinton were president. I am running for Senate specifically because President Trump won. He's a businessman from southern Indiana, and those are the credentials that he's pairing himself true. In terms of the rhetoric and the campaign rally type speech we're hearing, not necessarily. Mike Braun was asked, and so was Joe Donnelly, about the birthright citizenship issue that the president brought up earlier this week. Mike Braun wouldn't immediately come out and say, yes, he would support any pending legislation that Lindsey Graham may bring forward. So there's this mold of, yes, he is definitely a Trump supporter and working to win those Trump voters and supporters, but at the same time also a bit trying to chart a little bit of his own territory, too.
Matt, it's hard to ignore President Obama is going to be in the state on Sunday in Gary. Do you think he can really persuade and have some sort of an impact on this race? He's going to be campaigning for Senator Donnelly.
So listen to this and think about how much politics has changed, right? President Obama won Indiana back in 2008, albeit by a very razor-thin victory. He lost in 2012. 10 years later, here he is. And this is the challenge Senator Donnelly has really had in terms of what big names do you bring into this state, because he is trying to paint himself as this moderate to go after those Republicans. He's had Joe Biden here a couple weeks ago, but when Bernie Sanders was here to campaign for a congressional district south of Indianapolis, Joe Donnelly was nowhere to be found. So the interesting part about this is Barack Obama is coming in 2 days before the election in terms to shore up some of these votes in the northwestern part of the state. That part of the state is going to be critical for Democrats simply to turn out if Joe Donnelly has any chance of keeping his seat.
Matt Smith, thanks so much for breaking down Indiana politics for us, Matt.
Good to be with you.